Before we jump into today's real estate investing podcast episode, we wanted to remind you that applications for the second round of our none-to-one group coaching program are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard on August 22nd. The none-to-one group coaching program, led by David and myself, two pharmacists and real estate investors, is designed for individuals who are ready to take the real estate investing plunge, but need some help putting those final pieces together. We'll guide you through finding, financing, fixing, and filling your very first rental property through a mix of structured learning and real-world examples during our live classes.
We're giving our podcast listeners an exclusive 20% discount on the None-to-One course. So enter coupon code podcast20 on your application to redeem the discount. Again, that's coupon code podcast20 on your application for 20% off the course. So get all the details and apply for the course by August 22nd by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/none-to-one. That's NONETOONE. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/none-to-one. Can't wait to see you in the course. All right, let's jump into the show.
Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, good. Thanks. How you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing well. Summer is winding down, but our search for vacation homes still continues. So we're hoping for some more deals to start popping up here as the summer winds down. Maybe the market will pick up from the vacation perspective for us. So it's a good time.
Yeah. I know we're recording this in August 2022 right now. So it does seem like inventory is rising. Like I'm seeing a few more options come up, which hopefully is playing with some of those bidding wars and helping to get more options. I know we threw a couple offers out this week also, just as things are hitting the markets. Yeah, hopefully things open up a little bit.
Yeah,
at least.
we saw one we didn't have to fight anybody for. We were actually, we could have put a bid on it if we wanted to. It was astounding. So, and interest rates fell a little bit, which doesn't hurt either. So it's been good.
Yeah. Lots changing. I think even some of that just seasonal, where like in a typical market, and I don't know when we're going to start feeling like it's typical again, but in a typical market, right? Like things kind of slow down into fall. So maybe we'll see that here too with kind of the back to school season.
Yeah. And speaking of back to school, we are in a school mindset right now. We are just, when this podcast goes live, we will be 2 days away from the end of our application window for the next round of our none-to-one course. So we wanted to make sure to come to you guys on this episode, remind you about that application window because it is closing very soon and we don't want you guys to miss it.
Yeah, and it really was a ton of fun working with a bunch of pharmacists last spring about just education and brainstorming and even a little accountability in terms of achieving real estate goals. I know we had Marissa back on episode 60 talking about the house that she found and how that was a great start for her. She found a great deal, a great option for her. And so today we have another guest from that first cohort of participants.
Yeah, so today we're talking with Drew Register. Drew is a pharmacist. He is a pharmacist with APHA. He, again, was in the none-to-one founding class and just a really upstanding guy to talk to, right? Great pharmacist, great investor, really cool mindset. And I think just really humble that he was able to come on the show and share his type of story, which is unique for us.
Yeah, and in a competitive market, I feel like it's really important to, when you're thinking about pricing and interest rates that may not be in the buyer's favor, it's just important to be patient, watch all your angles, check your work, do that, the typical pharmacist thing, right? Like triple check everything. And we have a lot of guests that come on and they talk about their success, but they're investors that buy houses and do get hurt. So for safety-oriented pharmacists, I know that scary part of real estate investing is there. And I love Drew's perspective on talking about, when to walk away and when safety matters in that.
Yeah, and I think that was important to us to bring Drew on because it's a real story, right? And we're really trying to, with this podcast, I think, David, something you and I talk about all the time is that we don't want to just share the good or just share the bad. We want to share what real estate investing is actually like. And Drew's story is perfect for that because it shows what it can be like to take a conservative approach and know when to walk away and patiently waiting for that better investment to come along.
Yeah, and I know you and I have both been there when it comes to making an offer and we don't get it, or making an offer, we get it, but then something gets ugly and we have to walk away. So I think that is just a part of real estate. And particularly for someone just coming into this like Drew, I think it's a great sign of maturity and wisdom and restraint from a first-time investor to not just jump in and get emotionally attached. But so I was just super impressed. I think I'm hoping that that's an encouragement to everyone listening that sometimes it is okay to walk away from a deal, particularly and even in a tough market season like we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you guys will take the same level of wisdom and just again cautious patience from Drew's story. Learn a little bit more about what he does to find a good investment. And with that, we'll take you to the episode. Hope you guys enjoy. Hey, Drew, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. Excited to talk to you guys tonight.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. We became good friends over the last year or so as we spent a lot of time together on some calls and talking all things real estate, all things pharmacy, and so excited to have you on to continue that discussion, but in a more public format. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad that you used the word friends. I felt like I was a little bit of a bother at times, but I appreciate you guys always being so available to help me with any last minute decision making. So
not a bother at all. In fact, why don't we jump right in and you can tell people a little bit about your pharmacy background and real estate and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm born and raised in a small town in North Louisiana called Monroe. Went to high school, college, and then ultimately pharmacy school there. So I'm a 2016 graduate of the University of Louisiana Monroe School of Pharmacy. And really all throughout pharmacy school, I was involved in pharmacy organizations. And as I navigated my journey in pharmacy school, I was really open-minded to the future. I didn't have any set plans or ideas as far as practice setting. So I was really just trying to meet as many people as I could, learn as much as I could about the various practice settings. And I kind of kept going back to my association involvement. And I remember there was sort of a light bulb moment at the end of my first year when I went to APHA's annual meeting. And one of the speakers, the first speaker that I encountered, she was a pharmacist who worked for APHA. And I thought, man, like, how cool is that? She's a pharmacist, but she actually works for the association world. And I saw the great work that APHA was doing. I was really involved in my chapter, and I saw the impact that we were having on our community. And I thought, how cool would it be to be able to work at that level and impact the entire profession? So, long story short, that sort of stuck with me in the back of my mind as I continued the next few years in a pharmacy school. And ultimately, I decided in my final year that I wanted to pursue an externship with APHA and went through that experience, and it sort of solidified my decision to pursue the association management route of things. So at that same time that I was on the rotation, I actually applied for a residency program with the same association, found out that I was accepted into that residency, completed the residency, and ultimately stuck around. So I am currently still working for the American Pharmacists Association, and I serve as our Associate Director of Membership Engagement and Communications. Basically, what that means is that I am not a practicing pharmacist. And, I tell people mostly that I do a lot of membership and marketing. So definitely a niche type of position, but I really love that the work that we do at the association level can really advance the entire profession as a whole. And so that's where I'm at with my pharmacy journey today.
Yeah, and you and I've go way back even further than that because you've been, again, with the membership and all the engagement that you've been doing with new members and some of the new practitioner lunch and learns and the webinar series that we've done with your financial pharmacist over the years. So yeah, I love the work that you guys are doing over there. It's awesome. And again, good collaboration for us.
That was one of the most exciting things about my position was having the partnership with YFP because it essentially forced me to attend some of those webinars when I was like fresh out of school. And I probably wasn't super focused on my financial journey at that point, but it really got my wheels turning and got me thinking about, what that would look like for me and what my goals and next steps would be in that, in the financial realm of things. So very thankful for that.
Love it. Love it. Well, clearly you're on this podcast now. So somehow this marketing and all this different journey wove into real estate. So how did real estate enter that picture?
This is an interesting question. And I think, to be honest with you, I was sort of struggling after I first started my position. I was probably 1 or 2 years in, and I really was feeling like something was missing, or I didn't really know what the next steps were. And the best way that I can describe what I'm talking about is, in high school, I was so focused on my education and getting into a good college, right? And then in college, I was focused on developing my resume and being involved in organizations, making sure I could get into a good health professions program. Once I got into pharmacy school, repeat the cycle. I was figuring out that I wanted to pursue a residency program, again, focused on making sure I, had a good resume and CV for that. I had good grades, things like that. Once I got into the once I got into the residency program, I was thinking, okay, now I want to get a good job. And then once I kind of hit that ceiling, I was struggling with like, now what do I do? And I remember talking to my mom and I was like, once I get a job, what do I do now? Do I just, go to work and pay taxes until I retire? Like, is this really all that it's cracked up to be? And I think the reason for that feeling is that I'm a really goal oriented and driven person. And I've always had that next step to work toward. And once I got a job that was sort of missing. And so I think for me, it was really figuring out, okay, what am I going to use my time to pursue? What's the next thing that I want to accomplish? And I started realizing, I was taking the metro every morning, every night for, it was like 2 hours of my day. I'm packed in like a sardine. And I started to realize, okay, I probably don't want to go to an office the rest of my life. Wouldn't it be great to have a little bit of freedom? And that's really kind of what motivated and began this whole journey for me. And I know it sounds cliche to say, what I wanted was freedom. But when I say that, I wanted to have freedom to be in control of my own destiny. So if I wanted to go to an office, I could. If I wanted to live in a certain place, I could. I didn't want to be tied down to a specific employer and have, really no control over the decisions I was making if I wanted to travel. So I think pursuing freedom and financial freedom and sort of becoming your own boss allows for a lot of opportunity to kind of take your destiny and your future into your own hands. And I realized that's what I wanted, not right away, but at some point in the future, that's what I wanted to start taking steps to work toward.
And what was it about real estate that you feel like was the thing that was going to help you pursue that goal? I think a lot of people have that thought, right? You get to this point, and I'm totally with you. I did the exact same thing where it's like, okay, well, what's next? Like I have this great job, I have a good title. Like, okay, now what? And so I resonate with that really strongly. But why was it real estate that you thought was going to be the piece that moved your financial journey in that direction?
I felt stuck for a little while because once I had that feeling and realized that's what I wanted to pursue, I was like, how do I get there? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I really started to explore a variety of what I would call side hustles. And, I remember I would just do research in my free time, especially in the evenings after work. And, was learning about things like drop shipping on Amazon or sneaker reselling. I'm a big Yeezy guy. So, these were things where I was like, okay, I see people do this and they're profitable. I remember I was kind of starting to learn about the stock market. Again, I was going to these YFP webinars and I was getting more serious about my finances and my investments and things like that. And so I started learning about like day trading.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course real estate was always, another option on the table. And I think you have to be careful when you look into some of these different side hustles because you can kind of come across a lot of snake oil salesmen. I have to wonder as I'm looking into this and learning about this individual if they're just trying to they're dropping breadcrumbs and they may want you to purchase an ebook or their course, their mentorship course, and it's really vague, and I'm like, am I going to spend this money to invest in learning about what could possibly be a trend where I don't really know how reliable this side hustle is. And so the more research I would do, I just kind of continued to come back to real estate, right? Like it's stable, dependable. There have been reliable returns for probably the last 100 years. Like real estate just has a very fixed presence in the investment market. And I think the other thing for me was having so many trusted leaders as I would listen to podcasts or books or, watch YouTube videos. I remember I was watching a dropshipping YouTube video one time. And I mean, it was like a kid, like a 16-year-old guy. And, and there's nothing wrong with that. He may grow up and be, a really successful entrepreneur, but I just don't know how much I trust that 16-year-old kid versus listening to podcasts or books about real estate. You're going to come across some really successful, trustworthy entrepreneurs who really established, themselves in the market. And so really it was just kind of that trusted leader influence that continued to kind of drive me back to real estate. And then I think the last piece of things, my dad, all while I was growing up, my dad actually owned a mobile home park. And so I was able to sort of see that side of things and see what it was like firsthand to be in real estate investing. And, I was inspired. I trust my dad. My dad was a really smart businessman. And I knew that if that was, an investment vehicle that he was using that it was probably something that I would love to look into, and also would love to continue building that legacy.
No, that makes a ton of sense, particularly with just the longevity of real estate. The real estate has been around for so long. People have
Absolutely.
mastered it in many, many different ways. And it doesn't seem, I mean, aside from some of these house flipping shows that are on TV that made it like flashy, it's really just not, right? It's a pretty
Right.
boring investment strategy compared to a lot of things, but I think that fits. So from the example of your dad owning a mobile home park, I think that also speaks to the variety of real estate investments that's
Mhm.
out there. So just saying that like you wanted to get into real estate. So what does that mean? And how did you figure out which area of real estate you wanted to start to get into? Because that is just real estate in general is a very broad category.
Mhm. I think my real estate why is that this was going to offer me an opportunity to really flex my entrepreneurial muscle. It's something that I didn't really have a lot of control over in my day job, right? But this is something that I could take ownership of. And again, I wanted to position myself to be in control of my own destiny, be able to be my own boss. I don't have to answer to anybody, and have the freedom to travel and do the things that I really want to do. So that's really kind of how or what drove me to choose real estate and begin to go down that path.
Yeah, those themes that you're talking about being your own boss, the freedom, the entrepreneurial muscle, even that can apply to whether it's mobile home parks or storage units or apartment buildings or single family homes or vacation rentals or all those different things. So within that whole spectrum, what kind of started to light your fire as you learned more about real estate?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really tough to think about because there are so many different roads you can take within real estate investing. And to be honest with you, that was probably something that was a little bit intimidating to me at the beginning of, trying to figure out what side hustle I wanted to pursue or how I wanted to achieve financial freedom. And maybe something that um, sort of held up my journey. And so really I think it's just figuring out you know, looking at all the different factors and figuring out what is going to help you to be the most comfortable in your decision making process. So as I was looking, I was thinking, I was looking at the ROI that I wanted to get out of this. Really, as I'm making a decision of whether I want to invest my money in something like the stock market or something like real estate investing, what's the first thing that we do when we make a decision to invest in the stock market? We're probably looking at those different funds and then looking at historical returns, right? So I want to know that if I'm investing my money in real estate, that I'm going to be, getting a good return on that investment. And so really, I just started to kind of research. I knew the city that I wanted to look at, and that was like back home in Louisiana. Being in DC, it was just kind of cost prohibitive. So I started looking in the city and just getting the MLS listings and really seeing what different homes were going for, learning more about the prices, and then I would also look at kind of the same exact market and neighborhood as far as what homes were renting for, and that'll kind of give you a good idea of and a good sense of the budget that you would need to purchase these homes, depending on how many bedrooms you want and depending on what your rental rates and things like that are going to be. So really it was just a lot of research into the market. Once you know the market, you have to think about other factors like how many bedrooms and bathrooms do you want? Are you looking in a certain class of neighborhood? Do I want something that's going to have you know capital expenditure type repairs, or do I want something turnkey and that's going to be minimal, easy to manage, things like that? Do I want to be a landlord? Do I want to how much responsibility do I want to have in this project? So I think really it's the investors' comfortability with the investment and how involved they want to be. I ultimately decided I was looking for something around 3 to 4 bedrooms, maybe a couple bathrooms, probably in like a B to C neighborhood. And I knew I was looking back home. And then based on the price and the amount of money that I had saved up for a down payment on the home, that sort of guided my decision into what I was looking to purchase.
And so, yeah, you mentioned that, and I think it's important about trying to invest back home. So, out of state investment, right? Not where you're local.
Hmm.
Was that intimidating? Did that feel like, oh no, this is an easy decision? I know that this market's going to work, and I trust it. Or like a lot of people can struggle with that. Where do I invest, right? And you're talking about Metro DC area, crazy
Right.
expensive location versus back home. Was that an easy decision, or was it intimidating to think about investing out of state?
I almost feel bad saying that it was my decision, because to be honest with you, it was almost out of my hands. Certainly there were factors that went into me making the decision, but I think the first and foremost was that DC was really going to be cost prohibitive to me, right? The home prices are just astronomical. And, I even looked into surrounding areas sort of right outside the DMV area. And really you would have to go, a couple hours outside of DC to really get into the sort of market that would be priced at what I was interested in looking in. And so, I don't own a car in DC, and I'm thinking, it would be just as easy for me to invest in Louisiana as it would a few hours away from DC. So there was really no advantage to investing locally, if you would call that. The other huge factor that went into the decision making process is, even though I've been in the DC area for 7 years, I still feel relatively new. And it's such a huge city that, I don't have any sort of established key contacts or, a trusted network, certainly not in real estate, maybe in pharmacy, but not people that I would really rely on to really help me in this journey. And I think, if there's one thing that I've learned, you've got to have a dependable team of people around you to help you in this process. And that just wasn't going to be an option in DC. So Louisiana was really attractive to me because, I still have family here. So I'm here often. And then the other thing is that I have people that I trust, that are in lending, that are in real estate, that are realtors, so I kind of had all the pieces to the puzzle to be able to look it back home and know that I would have people there to really help me and allow me to be more successful and confident in my decision making.
I just put so much emphasis behind what you're saying with that dependable team. Like that is so crucial in doing this, particularly when you are a full-time busy pharmacist, right?
Yeah.
And then even more when you're trying to be out of state, because you can't just after work go check out a house or something like that. You need a team that you trust. How did that work as far as finding that real estate agent, though? Because oftentimes a real estate agent is kind of the core of getting started in that. The real estate agent tends to know a bunch of other people. So how did you find an agent, and then how did things go from there?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, so I had a close friend or not a close friend. I had a friend in college that, I would see every once in a while. And she ultimately ended up going into real estate and becoming a realtor. And I was fortunate enough during the pandemic, actually, I was kind of coming back and forth between Louisiana and DC visiting family. I was leveraging that time where I was working remotely to be able to visit my family, my nephew. And so when I was home, I started to run into her. We kind of run in the same friend circles. And so I knew that I was going down this journey of wanting to begin investing in real estate. And so I started being more vocal about that. When I would meet people, I would express that because I feel like if people know that you're looking to get involved in investing, they may have contacts that they can put you in touch with. And so really we just kind of happened to meet up a couple times by chance. And, I started to say, hey, I'm really getting serious about looking for a property. And her mom has actually been a realtor, for 20, 25 plus years. And so that was another advantage, is that this is a family business. And I know that they're really knowledgeable about the market. So even though we were not really, really close, she was someone that, I had a prior established relationship with and that I could really trust. And then I also knew her mom could be sort of like an advisor to us in the process. She had experience with real estate investing as well. So not just, primary homes and secondary homes and things like that. So that was attractive as well. So it started with her. And then, again, I would have family friends that I had a few that were mortgage lenders. My realtor had a really great GC that she recommended. So if I had to take on repairs after I purchased a property, it was really attractive to know that she had an established network that I could sort of take an advantage of, that was basically an extension of her. So it was just really nice. That was not something that I ever could have found in DC, at least not without a much more significant amount of time. I think it just takes time to build relationships and trust. And so already knowing her for, several years since college, knowing that she's a good, ethical person, reliable, dependable, hardworking, those were all things that really kind of solidified my decision to begin working with her. And then again, her having a network was just an added bonus.
I mean, that part is huge about having the team established already and finding somebody that knows investment properties. It's funny. A lot of people have a friend that's a real estate agent, but not everybody has a friend that's a real estate agent who's savvy enough and experienced enough to actually help with investment properties. And
Sure.
so it's really cool that you had that and were able to tap into that resource because not everybody has that right away. So that's awesome. And so early on, again, when you joined the none to one course, we were going through the criteria, working through that. You guys actually found a place, right around the middle of the course or near the end that met all the criteria, right? And that's like when all of us, our blood starts pumping. Like we found a place, it meets the, checks enough of the boxes. Like, all right, we're going to do this. And I love how you maintained your cool for the whole time instead of just like emotionally going all in. We sat back and like we clinically evaluated it. And so I really wanted to kind of walk through that process. Was that hard or was that, did you feel prepared for that?
Sure. Yeah. You know what? I'll be honest, it was a lot easier than I really expected. And I think that is, this is a shameless plug, but I was coming out of the YFP course and it really just helped me to feel super prepared to make that decision. I would equate it to, in pharmacy school, going into an exam, whether or not you're prepared. And
Mm.
I would always say my smartest friends were always the quickest to finish their exams because they knew right away, like they would know most of the exam. And then the ones they didn't, they were like, well, I don't know the answer. I'm not going to waste any time. And for me, it was very similar evaluating a deal because we had run through, so much deal analysis. I've looked at so many different properties. I think I started getting MLS listings and had told my realtor that I was looking to purchase something back in like October or November of 2021. So at this point, I'm constantly like every week looking at a number of properties and running the numbers. So, the more and more you practice and the more you look at properties and you see what they're selling for, you become more familiar and um, more in tune with what's happening in the neighborhoods. So numbers that are looking like great deals, they stick out like a sore thumb. So
Hmm.
it's funny because I think I had just told you a few weeks before that, I may be looking to move. I don't know if I'm going to purchase an investment property right now, but then I get this listing and it's like, oh man, this is like too good to be true. I cannot pass up on this. And it really got me excited. And I think that's how I also felt assured that this was a good deal, right? Because I was like not eagerly looking. It just kind of fell into my lap. And I was like, this is awesome. So the first thing I noticed, obviously, was the price. This was a home that was priced super competitively. It was in a great neighborhood in my city. And it was not newly updated, but it was obviously impeccably well maintained. So it had a brand new roof, brand new HVAC, stove, and fence. There was also a storage building. And so those were things that were also important to me because being, an out of state investor, I was like, I don't want any major capital expenditures or repairs. Like that is not something that attracts me. And I also thought I could come in and do minimal updating, right? So maybe some what you guys call neutral, clean gray paint, and maybe do a little bit of kitchen fixtures. So that looked great to me. And then based on the price, I was thinking, I can put 20% down, and everything just worked. I thought the numbers looked great when I initially.
No, and that's a really exciting step. Like and it's not this overnight success thing of like you started reading and like 3 days later there was this great deal and it jumped. But this is like 6 months of preparation. So I don't want to blow past that either. 6 months of looking at listings, getting more comfortable with your numbers to the point where when it came, like you knew and you could jump in with confidence and jump into that analysis further. So when you started trying to peel this back a little further and you're looking at this house, first off, it met your criteria, so you knew that it was worth going a little further. But what did you find once you started digging in a little further?
Yeah. So of course, I mean, when I started running the numbers, I'm really using estimates, right? I'm using things from Zillow, so I know there's going to be a little bit of variability there, and these are kind of loose estimates. So the next step for me, I think, that night or the next day, I am trying to do my due diligence and actually verify, um, plug in the 100% accurate numbers into my deal analysis calculator. So I'm talking to lenders and actually figuring out what sort of mortgage rate, or what sort of mortgages and what sort of interest rates they're going to be able to offer me. And then I'm actually calling the tax assessor's office to figure out what the property tax looks like. So I'm taking the steps on my side to, trust but verify. And as I speak with lenders, I'm realizing that, the interest rates are going to be a little bit higher than what I had initially expected. I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because I'm sort of limited to an investment property loan where you're going to have to put down, a larger down payment. And, typically the interest rates can be obviously a little bit higher than if it were a primary home loan. But that's what I'm looking at because, I'm not purchasing a property in DC. So it's not something I'd be able to house hack. And it's not really going to be a secondary home that I'm, going to be visiting. Like I'm exclusively looking to rent this. So as I'm working with the lenders, I'm realizing that, okay, my principal and interest is going to be a little bit higher than I had anticipated. And then I think the biggest surprise and shock was that, the current tenant, the current property tax per month was $53. And so I'm thinking, wow, that's a fantastic deal. And then I call the tax assessor's office and she tells me it's going to be over 150. And I'm like, that is triple what the current tenant is paying and what I'm actually seeing. And so, I think the current tenant may have been elderly and there may have been some sort of deduction that they were getting. But that was something that, between those two things sort of totally changed the numbers. I think when I had initially ran the numbers, I was looking at something like maybe $500 a month of rental income. And so even, a couple $100, like it may not look like a huge thing, but then you start playing with the numbers and then there's all these other factors, right? So one of the other big things for me was that to be able to get down to a 5.5% interest rate, which was going to be the most competitive for my situation, I was going to have to now put down 25% instead of 20. And so now I'm looking at, almost depleting my, my savings pool, which is what I was going to pull this down payment money out of. And I'm going to be in a position where I have very little emergency savings. So if something were to go wrong, I no longer have that to fall back on. You also have to think of like your closing costs. I'm looking at making some repairs, right? So I want some money on the side to be able to go in and make updates before I can even begin to market and rent the property out. So, I'm looking at this and I'm starting to say, okay, like this is going to be a much larger or, a significantly larger investment than I initially thought. And now the rental income is not going to be quite where I thought it was, when I initially found the property. And so all of those were factors weighing on my decision.
No, and there's some gold in there. I want to make sure that we repeat a few things that you said. So
Sure.
one is like the trust but verify, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you went and you checked all the numbers with the lenders to make sure, and that's where you found that a little more down payment, a little less emergency fund can get scary, and I think that that's very legitimate. We had a house that it probably couldn't have been more than like 90 days after purchase on one that we did where the furnace went out like almost right away. And that can be a big expense. Like those kind of things happen, and setting aside $100 a month for 3 months doesn't buy yourself a furnace, right? So you do need that emergency fund going in. Talking with the tax assessor's office, I think, is a huge tip for people to hear, because in different municipalities, sometimes those property taxes can reset with a new buyer for many reasons. And so I think you found that to be the case there. And those really changed that deal. So how did that play into the outcome? And especially after 6 months of looking, there's got to be at least some emotional attachment to this. Like, I want this. This has to work, right? So how did you push against that to make a conclusion you were happy with?
I mentioned this a minute ago, but one of the other things was an extraneous circumstance. I am potentially looking to, move this year at some point in the future, right? And so I'm also thinking, like, not only am I essentially depleting the money that I have saved, but I may be limiting myself when it comes to actually purchasing my own primary residence, which, there's a lot of opportunity there, right? Like that could be a property that maybe I look at house hacking or leveraging as a rental property, a year down the line into the future when I could probably get a more competitive interest rate than an investment home loan, right? So I'm thinking, this has to be a decision that not only makes sense for today, but makes sense for, probably the next year into the future. So I wanted to sort of weigh all that against each other. I really don't have any, there's no shame or embarrassment in, making the decision to pull the plug. I was initially worried because, this was the first time that my realtor actually had drawn up the offer. I had all of the paperwork. So I was in it. And I think the biggest thing that I was worried about was wasting people's time. I had called Nate like 3 times. So, I'm like, man, am I going to like let these people down or disappoint these people? I've had these lenders on the run, pulling numbers for me like in the evenings. Had everybody scrambling. We're trying to get an offer in like as soon as possible in this crazy market. So, I'm worried about people pleasing, but at the end of the day, like you have to understand that everyone understands this is your money and this is going to be one of the biggest financial decisions you make, right? And it's an investment, it's a risk. And so everyone was extremely receptive and totally comfortable. My realtor was like, this decision has got to make sense for you. And so that really reaffirmed my trust in her that I was working with the right realtor because she was so understanding, and I could tell it wasn't just someone who is, really just dying to make this commission and complete this sale. So that was really affirming for me. And also, I think the biggest takeaway is that this was a fantastic experience. I almost equate it to like going through a job interview process and ultimately you didn't get offered the job, right? But you can look back and say, I made some great connections and networked with some people that I could come across into the future. I was able to sort of hone my interview skills. Maybe you're a little rusty. I had never drawn up, or had any paperwork drawn up for a home purchase. So, I'm reading terms that I've never read before and maybe vaguely familiar with. So all in all, it was just a really good exercise because again, every step that I've taken up until this point has been educating myself about real estate and preparing myself to be able to know when the right deal comes along to pull that trigger. So again, this was just another positive experience that I know, the next time that I go through this process, like I'm going to be even more prepared to, know if it's a good investment or not. So it's really all positive for me.
I love that. And that's exactly why we wanted to have you on to talk about this, Drew, because it's so easy, right? And we talked about earlier on about listening to podcasts, and everybody's going to come on a show, right? And share their best story. Here's this killer deal I found in this crazy way that you've never heard of. And I got numbers that nobody can possibly achieve, right? Their strongest, craziest victory. And you've been humble enough, gracious enough to come on and talk about it doesn't always have to be that way, right? And it doesn't always have to work out. Walking away is not a bad thing if you take things away from that experience, right? You learn more about writing an offer. You learn more about what to look for. You learned a ton about which questions to ask and who to go to for those things. And I think that is the message that I want to get across to all of our audience is that this is a journey. It's not just either you're an investor or you're not, right? You're an investor today, even though you're not sitting there with a property in hand. It doesn't matter because you're taking the right steps toward that final piece. And I think that's awesome. And again, I really thank you for sharing that story because it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. You're gonna speak to your mentors in the real estate field, and everyone's gonna have started somewhere, and everyone's gonna have humble beginnings. And so I think it's just beginning to take those steps on the journey is the most important piece.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, Drew, I really appreciate you sharing that. The messaging has been awesome. I want to take us to our final infusion question. 3 questions we ask everybody on the show. All right. The very first question, as always, what's one tangible strategy that you use to make sure that your investing works hand in hand with your busy pharmacy career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I started doing this years ago, but it was really being thoughtful, strategic, and intentional about how I allocated my time. So I knew that, I wanted to get a start in real estate investing. And for me, it was like beginning to take those baby steps of educating myself. And so I would look at my schedule and say, okay, if I'm, commuting for an hour in the morning, that is an hour that I can be listening to a Bigger Pockets episode. And I would give myself goals. I'm a person who lives by a to-do list. I am the most, I'm your typical like type A pharmacist. And so have a to-do list and it may say like, listen to 5 podcast episodes this month and, listen to 1 audiobook. And, I may not always check off every single item on that list, but what's positive is that I am starting that journey and I'm beginning to educate myself. So I think really being strategic it's so easy to say like, oh, I'm going to get to that later, and then years will pass and you haven't taken even one step. But if you give yourself these small steps that are a little bit more bite-sized, like that becomes a lot more digestible and easier to work into your daily schedule, even though we're all busy, with our pharmacist jobs. And then I think the other piece of it is, in addition to educating myself, that was sort of like prior to getting to this point. And I would say once I do purchase a property, my plan is to manage the first property that I purchase, like be the own landlord for that property. And then for my second property, I would probably want to get a PM. So I really want to learn in and out what it's like to, be a real estate property manager and be able to evaluate like what that time commitment is and choose how actively I want to be involved in my investment journey in the future. So again, I talked a little bit earlier about like how comfortable an investor is with, the time commitment and what their schedule is and things like that. So I want to put myself in that position to kind of see it both ways and decide like, okay, is it worth it to spend a little bit more money and have somebody do this for me? Or, am I going to really take this into my own hands and maybe this will be a fulfilling extra thing I do in my time.
Love it. I love it. Those are great tips for people getting started. What's one resource that's also been most helpful to you in your real estate journey, whether it's a book, a podcast, a person, author, website, whatever that would be?
So I promise I am not being paid to say this, but it really was taking, the none to one real estate investing course with you guys. And the reason that I say this, the timing was actually so crazy. We started the course in like the beginning of the year, February-ish, around that time frame. So I told you guys it was in November that I probably started getting MLS listings and looking for properties. And again, the answer to my last question was that I was giving myself like bite-sized to-do list. And the next thing on my list was to actually invest and take a course in real estate investing. And I swear. And I was actually evaluating this other course, and it wasn't ran by a pharmacist, but and I want to say it was going to be maybe $1,000. And I remember texting Tim Ulbrich, and I was like, what are your thoughts on making an actual investment into this as a side hustle? And I felt like for me, it would give me some buy-in, but I was like, this is a lot of money before I even, do anything. And so the timing was just crazy because it was around that same time at the beginning of the year that I heard about the none to one course. And I would say, man, it was just so influential into helping me to get to the point where I was ready to pull the trigger. Because I would say before I took the none to one course, I felt more educated. I've been listening to podcasts and things like that for the last few years. But what the none to one course gave me was really a lot of deal analysis and putting everything that I had learned into practice. And I wouldn't say that was something that I was like actually doing in my own free time. It was almost like, preparing for calculations on the NAPLEX exam, and you're, making sure you've really got to practice. That's the only way you're going to get better at that. And that's what helped me to be so confident even about, being able to pull the trigger and purchase that house that I ultimately didn't purchase.
We appreciate that, Drew. That means a lot. We had a fun time with that course. And that, again, it was awesome. It was great to have you along. So thank you. And then the last question there, what's one piece of advice that you give to a pharmacist contemplating a start in real estate investing?
Yeah, I love that question because this is the most influential advice that I came across, and I'm going to steal it, but it is take baby steps to, begin the process, right? So if you're interested in real estate investing, upfront, it's going to seem intimidating, right? Like if I say, I want to get involved in real estate investing and purchase a home in a few months, like that is not going to seem like it can be accomplished or that it's feasible. But if you say, I'm going to start listening to this many podcast episodes a month, I'm going to, I want to read this many books this year. I want to, actively take a course. I want to invest in my learning. That's what I would tell somebody, take it seriously, educate yourself in the field, invest in your learning, even if you have to pay someone, and then devote time toward actually developing relationships with trusted mentors or other people who have been successful in the field. That's going to be more invaluable than anything. And I feel like that's probably where I've gotten some of my greatest knowledge, is just having one-on-one conversations and being able to bounce questions off people that, they've done this and they have 10 properties and they've demonstrated success in real estate. So
I love it. I love it. This is inspiring stuff. And if people want to reach out and talk further with you about this, how would they find you?
Sure. Yeah, I am at Drew Reg on Instagram or LinkedIn. Disclaimer: I don't have that 10 property portfolio right now, but I'm happy to share any of the knowledge that I've gained along the way and meet with anyone else who's interested in kind of getting their foot in the door into real estate investing.
And a good plug too, if you are thinking about joining the None to One course that, again, Drew is an alumni of, we will have the alumni back, and they're still part of the exclusive Slack channel that you get access to. So if you really want to connect with Drew and be a part of the same journey, again, reminder that you can learn more about the None to One course we're about to launch the second round of at yourfinancialpharmacist.com/none-to-one. That's NONETOONE. So definitely recommend checking that out. And again, Drew, just super appreciative that you came on, shared your story today. Again, I love not talking about a victory for a second, and just talking about the journey and the process, because that is what most of us go through, right? That's the reality of real estate investing. And so I think that's cool that we were able to share that today. So thank you again for coming on and sharing that.
Yeah, I love it. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you like what you heard on today's show, please leave us a review and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. If you have a question, know someone that would make a good guest, or want to connect with Nate or David, head on over to yfprealestate.com and join the growing YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. As we conclude this week's episode of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided to you for your informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on this podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist, unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you for your support of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. Have a great rest of your week.